All right. Welcome back to Time for Fellowship. I'm here briefly without my co-brost. Matt is currently in the trenches. Sounds like there might be a sleep regression going on in his house, so I think he's probably, dueling with his daughter with swords of some kind, trying to get her to go to sleep. He should be on very, very shortly. But in the meantime, we don't have to be worried because I have a very special guest who's going to be coming on all the way from the... Is it called East Coast? East Coast from Pittsburgh. More Eastern than me, coast area. And bring him on. He's a Masonic author. And I will have him join us quickly here and introduce himself right after we kick off the music.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right. So we're joined here by a special brother coming out from all the way in Pittsburgh to join us in Eastern time, so an hour later. So we've dragged him out in the wee hours of the night to join us. Brother, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, this is Austin Shifrin. I have been a member of Freemasonry here in Pennsylvania since 2006. Got involved in Scottish Rite pretty immediately as well. And in my involvement with Scottish Rite Valley of Pittsburgh, as an officer, wound up writing for our magazine. So after a few years of those contributions, I wound up just feeling inspired to collect some of those articles and release them as a book. That was entitled More Light, which came out in 2022. And a few years after, in the process of traveling to different Masonic bodies, making presentations both based on those articles, as well as writing some new custom material, released a second book collecting some of these newer papers entitled Black Ink Farther Stars in 2024. And then continued traveling hither and yon, making presentations to different Masonic bodies, and in the course of writing and collecting some new material, released a third book entitled No Common Fire in December of 2025. And that is what brings me here to join you gentlemen this evening. I want to thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And we might have been premature in starting because Matt just messaged me saying he's ready to rock. So we'll do a quick pause here for our listeners. Drag the what do we call him? Truant? No. The tardy boy. Drag the tardy boy in, and we will bring him on and join us, and we'll go into our next question. So hold on.
All right. Well, sorry about jumping in late there, but I guess I'll get the questions started here. So why'd you join Freemasonry, Austin, and what kept you coming back?
Okay, a reasonable question. I think the causes behind my joining are fairly typical that you may hear from a lot of American Masons nowadays. I did have a family member who was a brother where I grew up in New York City. My grandfather was a member, and that was kind of a kicking off point where I developed my initial curiosity about it. I did not join that young. I discussed it with him. He suggested that since I was about to go off to college, Freemasonry is fundamentally a fraternity, and why not go see some of what those are like, and if it was something that interested me, then I should discuss it with him further. And I went away to college and attended some fraternity functions, but had a fun time. Didn't necessarily see something in that experience that I wanted to pursue, ongoing for the rest of my life. So those further conversations never really happened between me and my granddad. Although, we were still very close. We had a very solid, positive relationship, but I never ended up pursuing that any further. But then fast forward, a decade or so, and I was still living in Pittsburgh, and I made friends with a fella who also happened to be involved in Freemasonry and was in the process of helping host an open house. And so I approached him about it, and I said, I explained that I had this earlier conversation about the organization with my grandfather, but that I felt like maybe some wires were crossed and maybe something had gotten lost in translation. And my friend Eric said, well, why don't you come out to this social that we're throwing? We're going to be watching the Pro Bowl football game. We're going to be shooting some pool, eating some hoagies. Why don't you come meet the guys and see what you think of it? And I did not know what to expect going into it, as you will also hear many men say. But when I got to this open house, what I realized was the interesting cross-section of diverse guys with different types of jobs and different backgrounds and different interests. But what I could see they all had in common was they were all just nice people. And I said, oh, this is clearly something I'd like to be a part of. That was how I initially got involved. What keeps me coming back is I'm a guy who enjoys intellectual stimulation. I'm a member of a traditional observance lodge, and I don't know if that's okay. It looks like from the nodding, this is a concept you guys have already been exposed to. It's a outcropping of the Masonic Restoration Foundation, and we like our Freemasonry intellectual. I was about to just say we like it nerdy, because that's how I feel. I like going to a lodge where I'm going to hear a research paper almost every month. Like, I like going to a lodge where I see guys not only memorizing their floor work, but talking about what it means and like how these symbols then need to be put into action in their lives. So like, if you think about our pets and animals, we talk about needing them to have enough enrichment in their environment, right? Like, oh, your cat or dog is listless because he doesn't have enough enrichment. And like, Austin needs some enrichment.
You need a feedy toy that makes you do a maze.
Yeah, like, I want to find a square and compass at the end of it. Like, so for me, like, what I need out of my masonry is it needs to make me think, and that's what keeps me coming back.
Awesome. That is. Go ahead. Sorry, Andrew.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna tie this into the fact that I'm looking at your Masonic resume that you sent us here, going, well, that's very obvious when you look at this, because you've done like everything.
No, I can give you the short list of stuff I haven't done. Yeah, I've followed some of these whimsies pretty far.
So it's interesting. So I've always been fascinated by TO lodges. We had a TO lodge in our area called Lafayette Lodge that ended up having to merge with our lodge. Unfortunately, they were very hardcore in the way that they had a membership requirements. Like if you didn't show up enough, you could get in trouble, and various like rules and regulations that were kind of hardcore. But as a guy who's also an intellectual Mason who enjoys that stuff, instead of going full ham into the TO, I've just been sneaking things from the TO playbook and trying to say, does this fit with my culture of my lodge enough that maybe we can add sneaky this in and try to sneak small little things. So like I'm writing our education short notice for tomorrow's stated communication. Not like I had enough to do, but we moved around.
Send you a text message.
My counselor is having some challenges right now, which is totally understandable. And so he's like, hey, last minute, I know it's last minute. I don't want there to ever be a lodge that we don't have education. So I moved it. And well, actually, I didn't move it. My predecessor before me moved the education to the front of the meeting instead of the end. So you call in, we call down because we're not allowed to do business with entered apprentice or fellow craft. So I make my education all appropriate for those guys because they get to miss out on enough as is. Call down, do education immediately. So when everyone has the highest energy, education, then boot them, call back up, and do business. So hopefully they're tired enough that they get to the point. And so I'm like that too. But yeah, I've always been fascinated with the TO structure, and I feel like it's cool. It's also interesting. So isn't PA ritual really, really different from the rest of the country? But broadly speaking. Yeah.
Right? So, of course, jokingly in a spirit of, brotherly, like ribbing each other, the way I've often heard it expressed is like, well, we do it right. I don't know what the rest of you states are doing, but like, yes, some of our ritual is a bit different to start with, like already in the first place. I mean, of course, it can be argued that one of the great joys of being a member and the Masonic experience is the opportunity to travel not only within your state, but to some other places and to get to experience firsthand those interesting differences. So I've sat in Blue Lodge in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, New York, Arizona. I think that might be it. Oh, North Carolina. And just to get to see some of those differences, and of course also the more significant overlap and similarity. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I have not been able to travel enough, but I'm fascinated by it. I know Matt's been able to see some of those.
Let's see. I've seen New Jersey, Florida, Illinois, and I believe there's one other one that I'm blanking on right now. But yeah, those for sure. I typically go down to the Cave Degree in Tennessee. I've been there twice, and they always rotate who's conferring the degrees down there, so you get to see different jurisdictions all the time. So
on the topic, we laid out the foundation a little bit in the intro. So you started as a guy who was writing papers, an experience that many Masons and listeners can empathize with, saying, I've written papers too. How did we go from writing papers to writing books?
Oh, it's interesting because there were baby steps in between. So the fact that I spent, hang on, I can't even do the arithmetic quickly enough to not embarrass myself. But the fact that I spent a decade or so writing articles for the Scottish Rite magazine meant that in 2021 or 2022, when I just started experiencing this mild curiosity, I've been very encouraged by the reception that I've gotten from the audience, which is the entire membership of our Scottish Rite Valley of Pittsburgh, and of course the occasional other brother that somebody hands a magazine off to. I had gotten all this feedback and encouragement that was very positive. So I started to wonder to myself, even in the midst of my hesitation and humility, I was like, would people be interested enough that if I collected this, not every word I've ever written, but the stuff that I thought was pretty okay, and put it together as a book, would there be enough interest that people would actually, I don't know, maybe buy it? But that also meant that I had already spent, almost a decade collecting material, right? And including enough stuff that I thought was fair to eliminate, too, right? It was only after having made that transition from these are different standalone articles that have, in fact, a column length. Like I was told, it needs to be roughly 1,000 words. So that means I was not also, trying to shoot for the moon either, right? Transitioning from that to, what if I wanted to write things that were more long form? Or what if I was not always catering only to that imagined audience, but was imagining a different audience, perhaps even a broader one? What would I do differently? So the process of creating or aggregating the first book was not the same as transitioning into that second book. Different creature, different animal.
So in your most recent publication, No Common Fire, so you're acquiring all this knowledge and you're putting it together in a way, in a form. When you were researching some of these articles or collecting them, was there any specific chapter or article that through your research, what am I trying to say here, changed your thinking on a certain topic in Masonry through the process of putting together that chapter?
Yes, there was at least one. So I will give you the fair warning that I'm doing a little bit of cheating because I have my proof copy here so that I don't somehow forget something that I myself wrote. So the first one that leaps to mind is actually the last paper in here. Yeah, I think that's the one that I would go to. And it's called 3 Masonic Bonds. And I wrote it for an ingathering of allied Masonic degrees, and it talks about 3 different symbols that we have coming from 3 different Masonic bodies that talk about these ties that bind, right? And how they differ from each other and how they interrelate with each other. So, spoiler alert, if you were planning on picking up the book, it talks about the cable toe, it talks about the scarlet cord, and it talks about the chain of union. The cable toe, and I will not divulge anything on your podcast that we are supposed to be secretive about.
It'll be harder on your end than ours. Ours is pretty open. Ours is grip signs and words and specifics on rituals, so we're pretty broad.
There's a lot. You and I know that there's a lot that we can talk about.
Yep.
That is not shush, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the cable toe, we're all familiar with, talks about the man's obligation to the institution, right? We make these promises that we will deliver on these obligations. And so when you talk about the oath that you have taken, you might even view it as there's a little bit of a power imbalance because there's this great noble entity, the fraternity, capital F, right? And there's all this allegiance that I owe to it. These are the things that I will do. Then, if you look at the Scarlet Cord, a story from the Old Testament, so certainly not that secret, because if you've got a copy of your Bible sitting anywhere, you can find it yourself. Before Israel went to attack the city of Jericho, the walled city, right, they sent in 2 spies. And there was a woman who sheltered them. And from a king who was trying to flush out these spies because he knew that they represented an approaching invading force. And so in exchange for that generosity, this woman said, all I ask is that when your arriving army arrives, please, spare myself and my kin, my family. And they did, right? And that woman's family then remained as, part of the nation of Israel for the rest of their lineage. Like from that day forward, that family stayed and lived among Israel. So to me, this represents the duties that the larger, more powerful force owes back to the smaller one, right? We started by talking about what the smaller party owes to the greater. Now we talk about the duty that the greater party has back to the smaller.
It's a social contract. Finally, it's a social contract. It goes both ways. Yeah.
Yes. And then finally, we have the chain of union, which you might have seen in a traditional observance lodge, but isn't exclusive even to Masonry, because if you've ever seen people sing Auld Lang Syne by poet Robbie Burns at New Year's, you might have seen them stand in a circle, right hand over left.
Yep.
Right? Forming this chain. So you have the tie that binds the smaller to the greater. You have the tie that binds the greater to the smaller. And then you have the chain of union, which binds all of the smaller to create the greater.
Well, and the chain of union, honestly, you just talking about is making my brain start to start churning on this, because we have in some of our appendant bodies, we do the chain of union. And I know they do it for Auld Lang Syne, but not only is it, I feel like probably a reference to the cable toe or similar symbols, but the fact that you're all on the level forming a circle, which is another symbol that always, no beginning, no end, right? Mm-hmm. Crossed in there. I always think, it's a cool symbol. I like how it does feel bonding, even though, you're just standing there hanging out with your boys. It feels bonding that you're like, look at us, we're one unit, right? We're all on the level, or you could even compare it to the symbol of the blocks fitting with such nicety because of the, rough and perfect ashlar. Like, it should look like there's no, it looks like it's the work of the grand architect rather than human hands and all that good stuff. And you can see that in those symbols too.
So researching and putting this paper together made me think differently about these duties and obligations, because we think all the time about what little me owes to the greater good, but have we talked much about what the fraternity is supposed to do in return for the members, in return for this allegiance, this loyalty, the time and effort that we sacrifice? What is the fraternity supposed to do to and for the man, right? And then, of course, the chain of union, what do we all do for each other to unite us into the capital F fraternity? If you got the tinglies while I was talking about that, then the torch has been lit. Right?
Yep.
It's no common fire that we work with. It is a mystical fire. If you get a chance to read the intro, maybe you'll find out what that title is.
There's no common fire. Wink. Yep.
And this is the thing, is if you say, oh, well, we've actually been sneakily borrowing a bunch of stuff from what we saw the TO Lodge doing, no TO Lodge worth their salt would resent the fact that they are rubbing off on the other lodges. This has always been the great hope of the Masonic Restoration Foundation, is that instead of this being an elitist or isolated incident, it's going to move a fraternity.
Well, to me, it's funny because, as my listeners know, I've said many times that I am me and Matt are both rapid thieves of other people's ideas. You go to a lodge and you see something you like, you're like, I'm not going to steal it full sale, but I'm going to steal. Yep, and I'm going to borrow that. And I've said that everyone's welcome to do that in my lodge too. Like, hey, we're one team, one dream, baby. Like, if you see some part in a degree that someone does in a way that you never thought about doing it that way and you like it, emulate it. Steal it. We all what is it, Matt, that we say about ships and sea?
Rising tide raises all ships.
That's the one. That's the one.
Sounds right to me.
Yeah, no, definitely full sale or full send on borrowing other people's ideas. I'm kind of trapped in my head right now because what was just being talked about with the chain of union and everything else has just got me. It's got me thinking about stuff. Yeah, all right. You lit the torch because now I'm thinking about stuff in a way I hadn't thought about it, and I think I'm gonna have to go on Amazon in a minute here and order that book.
Yeah, I was telling him it's in my card
You have
too.
my full approval. You certainly may. I mean, that's so, to then bring what I've said about this one specific essay back to what I was talking about more generally. I didn't join the fraternity to sit and pay bills and eat hoagies. I might have been lured in by that first hoagie, but I joined the fraternity because I wanted to tickle the brain. And so if I can do something that gets other people's wheels spinning, gets them thinking, and hopefully one day, like if I help create another generation of writers, then I will feel like I have accomplished something in a very Pikean sense, right? Then I will feel like I have actually accomplished.
Well, Matt and I always talk about too that one thing that always gets our brain tingling too is having conversations with brothers, similar to like, when we started this podcast, we said we want to share the fellowship that we have when we're having a pint together and we're, going down some rabbit hole together on something that got us excited or whatever. But to fuel that fire, you need to supplement by actually seeking knowledge. So you have to fill your funnel and then puke it in someone's face and then dump some more in the funnel and puke it on your buddy's face to help, get that fire going. Call it gasoline. You're spitting. It's like you're a flame. What's a fire performer. Yeah. Blowing your gasoline through it.
Don't be mad at me, brother, but you may need to take that one back to the, back to the drafting table.
No, the book is the gasoline. You put it in your mouth and you spit it on their fire. It's perfect.
Okay.
I'll take the gasoline and fire one over the filling the funnel and puking it on somebody's face. That was the one that was problematic.
It was in development in my brain. It was just a stream of consciousness. Just like speaking of Pike, just like all Pike's books.
I feel like this is going to make it to the finished podcast, though. I feel like that's going in the episode.
Nothing ever gets cut. Yeah. Nothing ever gets cut unless it's like so heinous that I'm like, that ain't going to the podcast. Like we've had guests say some crazy stuff before, and I'm like, that's not gonna make it on. Like
there hasn't been much over the years of doing this. There honestly hasn't been much that we've cut. To be fair, we like the candidness of it and the stream of consciousness element. A lot of our episodes are Andrew and I working through an idea together to get to a place with it. I keep glancing over at your resume here just because I'm like, man, you just really have done a lot, like a lot, and it's impressive, honestly. I do have a kind of off the cuff question that's going to take us off topic a little bit. What is the Bloody Run Court of Athelstan?
Sure. Athelstan is one of the bodies that is so let's see if I can keep all this straight, right? It's invitational and it's an extension of operatives. So you may or may not have heard in York Rite circles, right, that there's I don't want to call them an appendant body, but there's an observance called the operatives, which kind of emulates or mimics a little bit more the style of Masonry as you see it in England. And then, if you go get involved in operatives, that is a prerequisite for Athelstan, which models itself on the court of an ancient, or one of the earliest English kings. So Bloody Run is just the name of a crick out there. And so our court of Athelstan, is named after the location. Hold on, I'm going to move you for a second.
Oh.
Okay. It's tipping the microphone. But up there, that's a certificate from Athelstan.
Oh,
up there.
Interesting.
So we have to unpack a little bit more because we don't have, at least to my awareness, the operatives in our jurisdiction either. So this is a double deep difference. In our area, I think, at least in our jurisdiction, the invite-only bodies that I'm aware of for the or the main ones that I'm aware of, are the Allied Masonic degrees, the Rosicrucians,
Masons,
the Knight Masons. Then there's some invite-only ones for past high priests or past executives.
Yeah, there's like
then
Knight
there's the
Templar
York
priests and that kind of stuff.
I'm not in the Templars yet, so I know there's 2 of them over there too. And then there's the York Rite College, does a bunch of stuff. But yeah, so like I don't think we have the operatives. Is the operatives a invite-only body, or is it a TO York Rite thing?
No, it's funny, right? Because I joined my TO lodge before I joined operatives, and I was interested to see the things that they had in common. But the reason they have those things in common is because of the things that both bodies were imitating from Europe.
Okay.
But hope I'm not misspeaking here. So somebody's going to call into your show or email you and correct me. But operatives is invitational, and it is separate and distinct from TO, but you do have to be Royal Arch as a qualification for operatives.
So it is another invite body. Yep.
With our conversation tonight is send you some cool interwebs links to read up on operatives and Ethelstan.
Oh, heck yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Another curious question I have, just because I
just thought of something, though. The other place, and please excuse me, Matt, for
No, you're fine. You're fine.
But the other place that people can learn about some of these nifty and arcane offshoots is at Masonic Week in DC, which you may also already have heard of. And it happens in February, and it is very interesting. And so more Masons who are not even members of some of the things would look into Masonic Week and consider attending, even just for the fellowship. Like, regardless of stuff that you can or cannot attend during that week, you might just have a fun time just being there.
Oh, man. It's on my bucket list pretty high up to go to Masonic Week. I like annual communication so much because it's just Mason Fest, Wisconsin. I want to go to Mason Fest, United States. We've also gone to the Conference of Grand Masters, this year, and then we helped at the one when they were in Milwaukee, the Conference of Grand Masters of North America. And I like that for the same reason, just for Mason Fest. You're like, there's just Masons everywhere.
It's not even only national. So the pretty dope thing is my Allied Masonic Degrees Council, which is Odyssey 550, performed the Order of the Secret Monitor this past February over in DC at Masonic Week. And in the US, some of these AMD degrees, they just all roll up under like AMD Council. But in some other countries, some of these AMD degrees are their own whole separate grand bodies. And there were representatives of the Order of the Secret Monitor from, I want to say France, who came out to see like how we did it, and then like gave a little speech like thanking us after we did our thing. And like when you get more of a sense of the scale of Masonry, not only nationally, but globally, it is a very eye-opening experience.
Well, I am a member of the College of Rites now. I know they do something there, too.
Yes, we do.
I impulse. So you'll enjoy this, Austin. I impulse joined with my buddy Brian at 2 a.m. after doing the podcast, because after the podcast, we'll go in the group chat on the Discord with whoever wants to join in and hang out with me editing. But at 2 a.m., I was like, do you want to join the College of Rites? He's like, I'll do it right now if you do it. And I was like, done. Forgot I did it until I saw the email. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I'm in another body.
Wake up with a petition hangover. Oh, what did I join?
Oh, no. I only did it.
And then you and Brian both tried to talk me into joining, which I have not yet.
Wait until we get, because the main reason I want to join is almost as a magazine subscription. You're like, hey, for this low amount, I'll get the publication each year of their, what do they call it in that? The
Collectanea.
Yep, the Collectanea. And I was like, boom, done.
The latest issue of Collectanea that they sent out is about this system of Masonry that was being practiced in, oh gosh, was it 12th century? Something wild, like this system of Masonry that was modeling itself on the Knights Templar, but not really the way we do Knights Templar in the US. It was like with the whole system of like priories and rectories and like, so, the titles, and it gave me a completely different sense of why the general public is so confused about the tie between the Templars and the Masons, because these guys were actually trying to purchase like known and documented Templar properties to like use for like, housing their organization. And you're like, oh, like there was an era where these things were not quite so physically and temporally distant from each other. And I'm like, well, obviously that would contribute to greater confusion among the general public.
Yeah, right. They'd be like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, Collectanea is dope.
Yeah, that's the only reason it is. Like, for the price of one Collectanea, and then if I want to make it out to Masonic Week, even better. I was like, done. Send it.
I don't.
Mm-hmm. So, you got a question, Matt? No. All right, you good.
I'm just sitting here going, I'm going to end up joining the College of Rites now.
You're going to have your petition hangover.
So, not to backtrack too badly, but for the middle book, Black Ink, Farther Stars, I had written a paper that was talking about how the Allied Masonic degrees and the Grand College of Rites complement each other. And I wrote that paper for an earlier ingathering of Allied Masonic degrees, but I wrote it when I was only a member of AMD and had not yet joined Grand College of Rites. There was still plenty of research available, so I was able to say, like, these are the activities of the two, and this is how they fill in each other's gaps, as it were.
Yeah, it looks like they're working in different territories. Like, they don't cross over on each other's degrees, as far as I could tell, because I had them side by side, too. I was like, what the difference between these two?
Well, yes and no, because the interesting overlap between the two is that if you join AMD, you will receive, private copies for your eyes only of the ritual work for AMD. But the neat thing is, in most of them, there's like an introductory couple of pages that say, this is the history and legacy of the independent body that used to do this degree before it was declining and going defunct and needed to be absorbed up under AMD. And all of that research is supplied by, drumroll please, Grand College of Rites.
So they're cross-pollinating. Yeah, cool. Matt's brain's churning. He's like, how many more dues can I pay? How many more dues I pay?
I mean, I just tried to eliminate some of my dues, and it seems like we're just going to be adding some back in, but that's fine. It's more so a time commitment thing. That's always the burden, right? Our time can only spread
that is the truth,
so
and
far.
it's a precious resource that once you burn it, you cannot create more of it. At least not with the technology we currently have.
Not yet.
Maybe a little bit with a diet and exercise. You can add a little more time. So in No Common Fire, you had the chapter we just talked about where we were talking about one that really was inspiring. Are there any other chapters that really stick out to you that you were most excited to write or that you think are the most impactful?
There were a couple that I was excited to write, but excited to write for different reasons. One of the ones that I can't even entirely claim that I wrote, I better clarify that quickly. There's a sort of a monograph by a fellow by the name of Jacob Ernst, where he just called it his philosophy of Freemasonry. And this was, I want to say, 18th century. And I was exposed to it because it was posted by a group called the Square Magazine. They're based out of the UK, and they used to be a print publication. And I don't know whether they still print, but I think now they may be exclusively online.
I think they're online,
I read this paper by Jacob Ernst called The Philosophy of Freemasonry. And to me, it was really kind of turned me on my ear as far as like my understanding of what Freemasonry can and should be about. And I thought, gee, this is something that more people should be exposed to, but it's in that old-timey language that is not necessarily always so accessible and digestible. And so what I just did, without trying to claim credit for the authorship of the concepts, was I just redrafted it in more down-to-earth terms and included it as a paper in this book. And I highly urge that everybody who can either get their hands on the original by Jacob Ernst, or feel free to take a gander at my redrafted version as well. But his main premise is that the focus of Freemasonry and our Masonic activity should be growing in intellect and increasing in virtue. And if that is not the focal point of your Masonic activity, then you have missed the point. And the way he phrases it is frankly just as blunt as the way I just expressed it to you. And some people would feel personally attacked by that description. But like after I read it, and after recoiling a little bit and being like, oh wow, like that's pretty hardcore, I was like, well, you know, like the meme says, change my mind. I was like, well, no, you know what? I mean, like, he's got a point there. Like, you know, we're not here really to sell raffle tickets. Like, that's not, that cannot be the reason that ancient brethren assembled, yada, yada, yada. Like, we are here to stimulate and grow in intellect, to grow in virtue. And so we should be cautious of being distracted from those aims. And to me, even though I can't claim authorship of that paper, it might be one of the most important components of this book.
So I've had, so to that paper and that point, Andrew, 3 years ago, held a very similar point of view as the one you just proposed. We're not meant to be doing these raffle tickets. We're meant to become mystic and smarter and wiser, and all this stuff is a distraction. You know, I was reading, Observing the Craft. I was reading Wilmshurst, all that stuff, and they're pretty good at let's rah. And as I aged, I noticed something that helped me reconcile portions of it, because I just want to go down this rabbit hole because I think it's an interesting one. So the raffle tickets, the fellowshipies, the supper clubby stuff, for a long time it's felt like the intellectual esoteric Masons were at odds with the supper clubby fellowshipy Masons to a certain extent, saying, we are not all this. And then they're like, you should be this. And then the charity Masons are in the back being like, I'm just raising money. Leave me alone. And you're like, all right, cool. So what it dawned on me over a period of time, and my listeners will hate because I always repeat my Masonic philosophy, that there's 3 buckets that a Mason holds: brotherly love, relief, and truth. All Masons hold all 3 to a certain extent, but you'll find that people are preferential. Some people are brotherly love Masons. They like to do fellowship, help each other out, hang out. Some are relief Masons. They like to do charitable activities, do good in the world, etc. Some are truth Masons. They like to enlighten themselves, study, and history, philosophy, etc., right? And a goal of a Mason should be to try to fill all 3 of those buckets, even though they probably are going to be preferential to one more than the others, or 1 or 2 of them, right? So for a while I went, well, these are at odds. Where the odds was, in my opinion, is that for a long time the supper club Masons were saying, we don't have room for your bucket. The buckets were out of balance. So the problem wasn't that the supper club existed or that fellowship is a problem. It was that you require all 3 buckets in the ecosystem for it to work. It's like native plants that are in a guild that are planted in such a way that it provides stability. 3 is a stable number, am I right? So
it might even be a magic number.
Yeah, it might even be a magic number. So for a long time, I was like, we're not meant to be doing these raffle tickets. What is this doing to help you build virtue? But over the period of time of doing those types of mundane tasks and building those friendships with one another and stuff, and people rubbing off, having the ability to work with brothers who are virtuous at a silly task together, actually has improved me in virtue. So I have rechanged my ideology on it, that people learn differently, and when you make room for all 3, it allows an intellectual Mason to find what he needs to improve intellectually and morally, which could be studying, edification, reading, researching. That's what helps him do it. Some people are just iron sharpens iron, as one good man sharpens another. They're like, by hanging out with good men, I become a better man. And some people are like, by doing service to others and improving my empathy, I start to act more virtuously. And so For me, the problem isn't that Masonry's goal is to just do only that. It's that all three of these things were the same methods to give different types of personalities the ability to achieve that aim.
I think there's a lot of merit to that perspective.
There's my rabbit hole.
It is quite the rabbit hole, and you've been explaining that for a while, and I actually, it makes me smile the more times I get to hear it, because it's evolved. I remember the first time you brought it up. Well, there's 3 buckets. You got to make sure everybody's bucket gets filled, right? That was it. That was end of story. That was how you described it. And the evolution of the description and the understanding of it since then has grown exponentially. And it makes me smile because I just get to sit back and go, yeah, I remember the Andrew that came in and, to use your terms, vomited intellectual knowledge of Freemasonry all over all of us.
No, there's a funnel. There's a funnel. You need a funnel first. You need to take the funnel. You need to fill it up, and then you can vomit. You vomit into the buckets. All 3 buckets need their vomit.
You came in and just we're constantly in our face with.
I can't wait until this podcast makes it to air, whatever the correct how this episode drops, whatever the kids are calling it nowadays, and I send this link to my boys at Masonic Light Podcast to see what they make of this conversation.
Well, it's on brand. It'll be releasing in an hour and a half. It'll be releasing at midnight.
Well, yeah. Two and a half hours, midnight our time.
Thank God, because I had to edit it still.
Right. But okay, so just to backtrack, Andrew came into the lodge. He got raised. He was reading all the books, and he was Mr. I know everything Freemasonry because I've read it all in these books, right? He was also a much younger man, right?
27.
That was 7 years ago now. So he had that bravado about him yet. But as we all did at that age. And, it's just interesting and always makes me smile to see the development and the change in the demeanor that you've had over the years, which I think is proof of concept of what you talk about with the buckets, because you found that it wasn't just about reading the books. It was about the fellowship. It was about the conversations. It was about the raising money or doing charitable efforts and stuff like that. You found that all of those helped fulfill and get you to the same point probably faster and better than just focusing on one of them.
That's the funnel.
Yeah, and look, it's entirely possible that the way I have framed what Ernst said or my response is going to sound lopsided and asymmetrical. I would never argue, for instance, that book learning is the only way for a person to achieve intellectual stimulation or to derive lessons, because to an attentive mind, every life experience is going to contain, some little pearl of wisdom in it, right? I would still stand by the concept of where the priorities lie. So if my Freemasonry turns out to be so festive that in attempting to grow in virtue and intellect has fallen by the wayside, then I think I can state confidently that I would believe those priorities were misplaced. But to say that I shouldn't, for instance, take some joy in fellowship would also be mistaken. So there's room, I think, for some interpretation there.
Well, and I think the key thing in your point too is, what's the line from Ernst? The specific you said the goal is to.
It's to grow in virtue and in intellect.
I think to grow in virtue and intellect, I don't think you can actually argue with that, because it's legitimately more or less in our ritual that it says, what are you here to do? To improve myself in masonry. What's masonry? And you're like, it's mathematics and it's also virtue. And you're like, okay. And, and other things, right? We can go down the meaning of the word down forever. But so I think my point was saying, usually the authors who are bringing that up are coming from a stance of this tomfoolery is too much. We need to get back to something else. And I think they're correct in the way that they're saying, no, the goal needs to be that all three of these things should be helping at that. And you're like, but if your fellowship time and stuff is no longer directed like a ship steering in the right direction, and you're just becoming a raging alcoholic who's not controlling his temperance, and you're becoming, backbiting all the time, and you're actually degrading, there is a good warning in that too, to be like, remember what we came here to do and use these as vehicles to get there.
When somebody's giving you directions to navigate to somewhere, and then they give you this other landmark, and they're like, if you get to the BP with the blue sign hanging over it, you've gone too far. So it's like, not only can I tell you what you should be aiming at, I can tell you like what you should be concerned if you arrive at instead.
Right.
Matt, what's that line we like to say about intellect and wisdom that you say? What, intellect is how you know how a toaster works?
No. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad.
I was going to say, knowledge is knowing how a toaster works. Wisdom's not shoving a fork in it.
Look, it's funny because also, if you get interested in talking about virtue and philosophy, you're also going to get bogged down eventually, one day, sooner or later, you're going to get bogged down in semantics. So, like, if you're a fan of Kabbalah, for instance, you're going to find somewhere at the top of your friendly diagram these different nodes, these different vertices called wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And, unfortunately, if you get into a room full of dudes who are all interested in Kabbalah, they're going to have an endless argument over which one means what, right? So, you're right. You were saying your intelligence and your wisdom.
That's not my Sephiroth. That's your Sephiroth.
But having said that, just because the arguments could end up taking you in a little bit of a circle chasing your tail, I would still rather find myself trapped in that conversation for too long than, like, I don't know, talking about traffic and weather for too long. Like, that's why I'm talking about, like, I know what kind of masonry I want to be in, right? So it's like, instead of arguing over, like, the building fund, I would rather be arguing over wisdom, knowledge, and understanding and arguing over, like, did Brother Ralph sell enough raffle tickets? Like, so these...
Yep, yes. I get that point. Yep.
Where my priorities lie. I don't hate raffles.
Right.
I like
No.
When I win. I know where my priority stands,
Right. Well, and I think it's about seeing the end goal, right? Not the way somebody gets there, right? But
yes.
that they arrive at, that we all arrive at the same point, right? Regardless of how we get there, each path is going to be our own. So,
when I talked about the paper, the three Masonic bonds, right? The cable tow, the scarlet cord, the chain of union, and I was talking about what the fraternity owes to. Ooh, I hit my microphone.
It happens.
What the fraternity owes to the man, in addition, jointly with what the man owes to the fraternity, there is something that is not explicit enough in our floor work, our ritual, our Masonic rhetoric that could stand to be a little bit more explicit. And when we keep falling back on this old chestnut about what does Freemasonry do? It takes good men and makes them better. The follow-up question ought to be, how does it do that? Or is it doing it at all? So if you join the lodge and you're a member for 5 years, but what you've done for 5 years is go to lodge, and you are the same guy somehow 5 years down the road as you were when you joined the lodge, then there is something else you were supposed to be doing that you have not done. And I know when it came out of Ernst's mouth, it sounded harsh to me. So when I repeat his words, I fear that I sound harsh to somebody else. But that doesn't mean I think he was wrong.
I think it's important to shake people up.
I don't think he was wrong either, and I don't think there's any problem with putting it bluntly, which is what he did, right? And we have a brother in our jurisdiction, shout out to worshipful brother Pat Cholka, who likes to say that Freemasonry doesn't make good men better. Freemasonry doesn't make anything. It gives you the tools to do that for yourself. And that's where the end game lies, right? You have to be willing to pick up the tools and do it.
So speaking of giving shout outs to people, there's a fella who's out the farther east end of the state of Pennsylvania, Brian Maddox. And if you ever get involved with me on the Facebook, you will hear me talk about him all the time. Maybe I'm a fanboy. I don't know. But he also talks about this meta problem in Freemasonry, where Freemasonry seems to sometimes spend a lot of time talking about Freemasonry. So if you want to get into Freemasonry and then study something or anything, you could spend some percent of the time like studying Masonic history or Masonic philosophers and be able to say, I know this lodge was founded in this date and this guy traveled to this other state and found 10 other Masons. Fine. But like, what if you studied comparative religion and psychology and philosophy,
virtue ethics,
civics and ethics, and like you could study a lot of stuff that to me would be very Masonic of you to have studied without it having a square and compass slapped on it. So at the risk of maybe putting words in Brian's mouth, I think that's kind of the angle that he's coming from. And to me, that dovetailed a lot with what I got out of Ernst, which is why I'm always shouting out Brian.
Well, it's almost like a reference to the whole finger pointing at the moon type of thing, where it's like, if you only look at the Masonic books, you're staring at the finger, and it's like, no, I'm pointing at, I mean, if you look at, the I can never pronounce Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, I can never pronounce it. Nicomachean Ethics. If you read Nicomachean Ethics, or you read any amount of ancient philosophers, whether it be Seneca or you read some Marcus Aurelius, you will see lines that are almost word for word Masonic ritual lines, where you're like, did this guy borrow this from this sentence in Meditations? Like, I'll see it in my ritual book and be like, I see what they were reading that week, baby. And the thing is, when you're reading those, I feel like that's you looking at the moon that the finger's pointing at, where it's like, I'm telling you that you should do this. And I'm going to give you the intro to 101. Here is the Masonic definitions. But I'm pointing and saying, there's more than a paragraph to unpack in that topic. But you don't just need to listen to Masons rehash it. Matt and I, in our early podcast days, did a breakdown of the cardinal virtues and went through every single one.
Nice.
And we would approach it first we would take the description of what the definition is in Masonry, where like Mackie would say, this is what it is. And you're like, all right. Then we would break it down and look at it through St. Thomas Aquinas and stuff like that. And like the traditional, like what were the sources that the Masons who had been writing this would have been familiar with when thinking about this? Why is the cardinal virtue so important? Cardinal meaning a pivot point, right? And that's only in my head right now because that's my education for tomorrow's on the cardinal virtues again, because we already talked about it. But so, and then we went through like applied, like, okay, what does it matter? Why does this matter? Like who gives a shit? You can just say that. Is it just to pat yourself on the back, and then explaining what does virtue do, as far as living with flourishing and I mean, it's really the art of happiness. You can be as miserable as you want and it don't matter. But if you want a playbook for joy and flourishing, virtue ethics, and that's a huge part of Masonry.
Ooh, speaking of virtues, excuse me while I split the frame for a second.
Oh, don't worry, we're not recording. This is all audio. We just get to stare at each other.
Right.
Oh, okay. So nobody's going to see this, except you guys. So a couple of years ago, the fella who was at the time master of Lodge Ad Lucem brought in this book, a small treatise on the great virtues.
Okay, small curious on the great virtues.
This fella, what is his name on
Heard of that one.
Too tiny. Andre Comte Sponville.
Andre Comte Sponville.
Yeah. If you ever need some more fodder for one of your lodge programs, highly, highly, highly recommend.
I bet that'd fill my funnel.
I bet it would.
Oh yeah, right. Because not like you've got any other books in your TBR pile, right?
Yeah, throw it on the pile. Throw it on the
Throw
pile.
that off the pile.
The
Right.
TBR grows
should
faster
already-
than I
should
can read
already
them.
Just get myself comfortable with the idea that you're never going to read mine because you've got 16 other books to get to first.
No, Austin, here's what has to happen. In the random books that are sitting on my shelf, at some point I'll be like, oh, and I'll just, oh, you know what? I meant to read that. And then you just got to get lucky that my ADHD grabs it and goes, I guess I'm going to sink my teeth into that. Then God only knows if I finish it.
Oh, squirrel.
Yeah, a piece of candy.
I just want to have time to read again. That's all I want. I don't even have time to stop and read right now.
You get it.
I have a question.
Still working on that Viking history book.
Oak, Ash, and
700
Thorn.
pages long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of Oak and Ash. Yeah.
Children of Oak and Ash, yeah. So we mentioned a couple times when we were talking about that, there was a question that's been lingering in my mind on we said that, there's things that we lay out that we owe to the fraternity, and there's things that the fraternity owes us in a social contract. Let's go down this rabbit hole. What does the fraternity owe us?
The fraternity owes us some ethical and civic instruction, but more so to help teach adults reasoning, right? Like there's a lot of subjects that are taught in school, public and private, right? But the notion of being able to reason is kind of getting to be a lost art. And there was a time when the study of rhetoric, right? Logic and rhetoric, throwing those two together for a moment, rhetoric was more utilized in a sense of, cause and effect, where it was not just about delivering the news, but delivering an oration in a way that you could move people to action, right? So why is it useful for a guy who has now received his 3rd degree and is told that he's permitted to participate in the business and the life of the lodge? Why is it important for him to understand rhetoric? Well, because he's going to be getting up in that setting, and he's now permitted to voice things full-throatedly to the rest of the body politic. So, you now have an opportunity to move people. You need to be capable of reason, right? Can you gather facts from your life experience to help form your opinions in a knowledgeable fashion? And then, are you capable of synthesizing that information and conveying something in a way that's going to move other people to action? There's a difference between semiotics, the study of symbols and how they operate, and hermeneutics, right? There's sometimes this disjoint. When you speak words, the meaning, as you conceived it, of the words that you formed doesn't spontaneously appear in the brain of the other party in the exact same form as that meaning appeared in your brain before you generated the vocalization. There's going to be a gap, and there's going to be failures. So what the fraternity owes men is this education. And if you understood how you can wield it and also how it acts on you every day, you have not only the opportunity but the duty to expand in your empathy for other people, thereby growing in virtue.
It's like, so go ahead, man.
No, it's on you.
You had your processing face going where you're like, I need to think for a second. So it's almost like, so I always like this line where people be like, why is the winding staircase, which I don't even know if you guys do in PA because I don't know what the heck's going on out there, but in it when they go, the liberal arts and sciences, why are they required to be free? Right? Say we're free and accepted, free to travel, we should seek a level of freedom. And they go, well, if you don't have reason, you're easily manipulated. So are you free, or are other people's wills being applied to you unduly and you're just falling for another person's will through their rhetoric? if you don't have a basic understanding of how the world works, you're also easily manipulated, and you don't have the freedom to... That opens the doors to a lot of things when you have a basic understanding of the natural sciences, geometry, and how things work, which most people get anyways in the modern era because the liberal arts and sciences has been sprinkled in, but it always do. And if you don't have the understanding of, music and all that stuff and sound theory and things, it seals you in, and that to be free, you need to attend to these things if you want to, live a flourishing life where you, like you're saying, your brain thinks it's trying to explain something, but when it's translated to that brain, depending on how you wield your language, it's going to be farther or closer to what you're trying to say. If you say something in a stern tone, but you mean it with love, like, you piece of shit, I love you so much, someone might not think that is as cool as you think it is, because, you have to learn the context and rhetoric and how to have an expansive vocabulary so you can better capture your brain and try to shove in their brain a little bit closer to what you're thinking, right? Me put brain in your brain. I'm putting my brain in your brain, Austin. I'm putting brain in your brain.
Good idea.
But it is. I mean, rhetoric's important. If you can't explain yourself, you could be the wisest man on earth, but if you don't know how to explain yourself correctly, no one will ever know because they can't understand you, right?
But, worse yet, there's an argument to be made, and some of this has been discredited a little bit, but you've probably heard of the Worf-Sapir hypothesis, which is that language constrains what ideas you can even hold, what you can even conceive of.
The Eskimo snow argument.
If you cannot convey the idea, it might be argued that you're not even capable of holding the idea in the first place.
Yeah, I got my degree in anthropology with a minor in Celtic studies, language focus. And in my linguistic classes, we talked about the whole Eskimos have 100 words for snow that describes slightly wetter, but not as wet as this other snow and this. And he goes, but since they have a word, they can conceptually notice differences that your brain is incapable of. And they go, it's like someone who doesn't know beige from soft white. They might just go, that's all white. But by naming it, you're able to see.
That observation has been made about other cultures and their languages with different shades of nuance or different hues. There's also a fascinating study that I heard about in a podcast earlier today, and I'm sorry that I don't remember the specific one, but it was talking about an Aboriginal culture somewhere, which instead of saying the future is in front of us and you march towards it, and the past is behind you and you have already departed it, in their language and their conceptualization, their entire culture refers to the past as what is in front of you and the future is behind you. And why do they say that? Because the past is something that you already experienced, so you can see it. And the future is something unknown, so it is always sneaking up behind you. And then there, where you would draw a timeline left to right and say, this is the way that I am progressing, they would draw it in the opposite direction. And so language not only conveys your meaning from one entity to another, but it may in fact constrain the shape that the ideas themselves can even have. And sadly, for better or for worse, we have now begun to foray into the territory of my fourth book, which I only just started working on.
All right, give us the well, it's interesting. My brain, before we go down that rabbit hole, what's interesting is, like in Irish, they don't say really yes or no. They say like, I am or I'm not something. So they don't really have a yes or no, which I thought was interesting. And they also, like, when you think about the way it can affect how you see stuff, a lot of stuff is like, God, I need to remember my education. It'd be like, oh, I put that on you. Like, is there tired on you? And you're like, the tired is on me? And so there's like a distancing where you think someone doesn't say, oh, it's like not internalized. It's not, I'm tired. It goes, is there tired like on on you? Like it's something you, like it changes the way you kind of see things in the subtleness of how it's structured too.
The conceptualization, right? So in Spanish, we don't say I am hungry, like it's a condition of my existence. We say tengo hambre, I have hunger. Like I'm a whole human being. Right now, I happen to have hunger.
Tinga tertia. Yeah.
We might not, I don't believe in Spanish you would say, it would be awkward to find a way to say the book, I dropped the book, you would say el libro se cayó. It fell itself.
Yep.
Right? You take blame out of the equation, and now if you go ahead and survey Spanish speakers and English speakers, they will attribute agency in situations differently, and it's possible that it's either as a result of their language or in some other fashion goes hand in hand with the linguistic constructions that their culture reinforces.
Oh yeah, and then in Spanish too, they'll have some where it's like you have tired, or you have hunger, you have thirst, but then you can be. Is it tired that you can be, or you can be sleeping? Where it's like more direct, so it depends on like the type of situation. Where some's like I have cold, but the other can be like direct. I forget.
Nuance, baby.
Nuance. So tell us about this new book that you're up to before I go down a linguistic rabbit hole any further than our listeners can handle before we go any deeper.
How about any farther than your co-host can handle?
Okay, so I'm just wrapping up. I'm just preparing and accumulating some of the research for my fourth book, which is going to be entitled To Think and to Know. And it's going to talk largely about the philosophy and psychology and linguistics of human thought, naturally comparing it a little bit to the shenanigans that are achievable with AI and large language models. And, I shouldn't be so dismissive, but comparing and contrasting these two different processes, ways in which they are more similar than we might be comfortable admitting, ways in which they differ, and what it means to think and to know. I think one of the things that I actually did not wrap up in my research aggregation yet, but I'm definitely interested in throwing in, at least as an anecdote, maybe even just in an introduction, is the funny phenomenon when you are talking with somebody else about, let's say, a movie, and they say, oh, didn't so-and-so play the part of Sam? And you believe that the person with whom you are speaking is incorrect. You believe that somebody else played the part of Sam, except I've already woven that word believe in there. Because the funny thing is, in the course of this argument, you don't think that somebody else played Sam. You would express it as, oh, no, I know so-and-so played Sam. And then when you are proven incorrect, you will express it in past tense as I thought actor B played Sam. I thought actor B played Sam. But at the time, you would have said, I know the answer to this. Actor B played Sam. So what is the phenomenon that happened? Is it just a sleight of hand with linguistics where I've now substituted the foam ball for a dove under the cup somehow? Or did you somehow make this magic transition from knowing to thinking? What happened in that interim? So there's a lot more serious psychology, philosophy, and linguistics going into it, and a handful of 3 or 4 fairly humorous anecdotes, not mostly even from myself, but from a couple of wonderful stand-up comedians that illustrate some of these same concepts. Because let's face it, there is something whimsical about the vagaries of the mind. And then, of course, there is much that is very, very serious.
I like it. I like it a lot, and I'm definitely excited for that. That's fascinating.
Matt's going to spend
not
some
gonna sleep well
money.
tonight.
Matt's going to
I
spend
want to
some
be upfront with
money.
you guys. The thing that makes me the most nervous about this fourth book is it is going to be the farthest afield that I have strayed from, quote unquote, talking about Freemasonry.
Yeah,
Now,
you're
you could
definitely
also
stepping
argue
out.
that you could also argue that it's a very Masonic book, but it won't be a Masonic book. And so that I am definitely sailing my ship into new and uncharted territory this time. And I am both excited and a little anxious about how it's going to turn out.
Well, that's part of the fun, though. If you could just did the same thing and just wrote about Masonry forever, you get boring. You got to get a palate cleanser. I always tell Matt, I read one Masonic book, then I go, I'm going to read a history book. I read one of these, I'm going to switch to a different topic because I need a palate cleanser. I need to...
Well, I'm glad you're doing it because that takes us, I think, realistically, that takes us all the way back to a much earlier topic in our conversation, which is this notion of what was the fraternity supposed to be either teaching us or at least making us more capable of consuming in the first place. And surely that diet wasn't intended to be exclusively about Freemasonry.
Not supposed to be all green beans.
Right. Well, and I would argue that studying things that aren't Freemasonry helps you learn about Freemasonry, right? So, and I think we've danced around that topic a little bit, but you can study examples of people that lived good lives. You can study history. You can learn lessons from it and everything else that contribute to you increasing in intellect and virtue, which is the whole point of Freemasonry, which means you can study things that aren't directly Freemasonry to get there as well.
You've got it.
So, looking at the time, I'm going to move us to our last question, and it's the one we ask everybody that we're aware of is a past master of a lodge or a body. What would be your advice that you would give to a either senior warden or whoever it may be, a first-time incoming master as he approaches the Oriental chair? What advice would you give that young officer?
I think I would probably lean on 2 points, and they're pretty practical, so I hope I'm not overlooking something more philosophical that I should have said. But the 2 points that I would probably lean on is, number one, really give some thought and priority and attention to the notion of having programs during your year. Like, be it speakers from inside your lodge, speakers from outside your lodge. But like, don't let there be meetings where there is not some attraction of excitement because something stimulating is going to happen. People should have an expectation that they're going to show up to lodge and, be excited and learn something that they would have been sad if they had lost out on that opportunity. And then thought number 2, although they should have gotten started on this much earlier than, by the time they're arriving as senior warden, is complementary, right? This, like you've been saying also, this doesn't, the endeavor doesn't have to exclusively be about intellect. Be doing something over the course of years to foster a feeling of community in this unit of men, so that when meeting night shows up and people need you, you should not feel comfortable bailing out. You should, at the risk of sounding like I'm not, not into self-care or something, like you should wake up that day or come home from work that day knowing that the brothers need you and that you're going to be there and deliver for them. Whether you're the master, the senior warden, the junior warden, the deacons, the stewards, like, to be thinking about each other and say, you know what, like, I might not be feeling 100% right now. I might not be feeling the cheeriest I've ever been, but my brothers need me, and I'm going to be there. Even if I am, quote unquote, just on the sidelines. Your lodge needs you. But you've got to foster that feeling of community over the course of years. That does not happen overnight.
Ooh, that is some seriously solid, good advice. Yeah. Yep. And that could take us into a whole nother hour-long podcast, so we should just not talk about it.
You may have to invite me back.
Oh, I know, dude. I would love to. We could ramble on for hours, man. Dude, I know that we didn't want to go to rabbit hole, so I'm going to keep it brief. But, dude, you know what resonates with me with that is just this week I've been thinking so much about, we had some of our past masters, what we call passed out is a term that we learned from another brother in the podcast, saying they get out of the East and they say, don't passed out, meaning they go, well, I did my time. And then they disappear into an appendant body, or they go off to do other hobbies and things, which great, good for them and all that stuff. And I was sitting there the other day staring at our past master board, and, one of them passed away. A couple have gotten involved in other things. A couple have moved and all that stuff. And I was like, these are all my mentors. I was like, where are my mentors and my past masters? We still need them. I was like, I still need these guys. And as master of the lodge, where my remaining mentors, are still in the officer line, or maybe one of them's on the sideline at this point after a long trip through the line again, taking his side time, but he hasn't disappeared, right? Some of them are there, but a good majority of them are not. And I go, And, as master of the lodge, who had hoped that, those guys would be there to help me, that's one of those things where you're not done because you serve. Like, your little mentee babies need you, and now you're gone. And, it's just a bummer. And I think it is important to remember, your lodge still needs you. It doesn't matter if you're a steward or you're on the sidelines. Even if it's just your friendly comment at the door coming up and shaking your hand and be like, "Missed you, man. What's going on?" Like, they need you in lodge for sure.
100%.
Cool. Well, I think it's a great place to wrap it. Guys, if you want to check out some of Worship Brother Austin's publications and his newest book, No Common Fire, I will be putting a link in the show notes with all the details so that you can find all that information, so you can pick up all the copies of all the books. You can keep an eye out. I assume you have a website, right, that's direct, or is it just on Amazon that you prefer to be followed?
I do have a regular website, and I think that it's literally just austinshifrin.com. I could probably confirm that for you quickly.
Yep, I will make sure it's in the show notes so that viewers can keep up when, if there's any new publications or this new book that you're working on start to come out, stay on top of what's going on with that, and we will post that in the show notes. Just go straight down from the episode and you'll find that. Make sure to follow us on social media, let people know about us, all that good jazz. Late nights on Wednesdays, you can join us live on Fellowship Unplugged on the Discord channel, where I edit and people usually just harass me and make it harder for me to edit. So you're welcome to join there.
Yeah, if I may, I would throw in that I do have my own separate website, but as it turns out, my presence on Facebook is actually the best way to stay in touch with me, because the thing is, I actually talk less about my books. I talk more about all the kind of stuff that I've been talking with you guys tonight. So concepts from comparative religion, concepts from philosophy, concepts from ethics and civics. Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about on Facebook, in addition to which it's an easier way to keep track of where I'm going to be appearing next in person. So on Facebook, I'm there as Austin R. Shifrin, author. So if you look for, the first name is spelled just like the capital of Texas, Austin. Last name is Shifrin. And to differentiate from my normal, hey, this is me as a human being page, I also have an author page. So it's Austin Shifrin, author.
Perfect. That'll be in the show notes as well. I just made a note right here. Perfect. Cool.
I just followed it, so.
Too fast and furious on me. But yeah, otherwise you can always shoot us an email at
timeforfellowship@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for your support. Worshipful Brother Austin, thank you very much for coming on. It was
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. So, and everybody listening, have a great day.
Take care.